We're joined this morning by Mr. Tunde Macalabi, who is the convener, Professionals for Change. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, some of these talks about or appeal, as it is, in terms of coming together, having a conference. Yesterday we had new perspectives. They're talking about regional conferences now, that it may just change the scope of things. Anything new to you? You think that will solve any challenge?
Well, what is happening, and it's not isolated to Nigeria, there seems to be a wind of change that is blowing across the world. Take a look at Russia, for instance. Who will have thought that people will gather in their hundreds of thousands to protest against the return of Vladimir Putin, the former president? So there is a rousing consciousness in the world that people must be involved. People must show their anger at the way their affairs are being run.
If it's not run properly.
If it's not run properly. Okay. Take the issue of the protests that attended the last fuel subsidy removal. It has woken up Nigerians to the realities of our pathetic economic situation and the faulty decision making at the federal level. Take a cue from revelations at the National Assembly probe of the fuel subsidy. We had companies that were incorporated in 24 hours, briefcase companies getting allocation to supply PMS in this same Nigeria. So we have monumental problems that we need to confront. President Jonathan came in and promised us transformation, promised us change. Okay, but along the way, it seems to have been hijacked by shenanigans and opportunists who do not mean this country well. We'll go back to the issue of the fuel subsidy and all that. People gave approvals to these briefcase companies.
Yeah, but is it this singular matter? Because, I mean, there are those who say that there's always been this structural defect that we've had from time.
That's what I'm saying.
Institutions not functioning properly.
That's what I'm saying.
So,
That's what I'm saying. And this is why Nigerians are crying for a change. We want a situation where institutions of government are run by people who have integrity, who have a fear of God in mind, to do what is right for Nigeria. Nigeria is destined for greatness, but we need to change the personnel that are running the affairs of Nigeria. We need people of high integrity who would deliver the dividends of democracy that Nigerians are yearning for. Nigerians cannot wait. Nigerians are impatient. So we are saying that, look, Mr. President, you mean well for Nigeria, but for goodness sake, whoever is in your cabinet that cannot key into your vision, do not hesitate to change your management.
Let me bring this in, because, I mean, if you say that, Nigerians need certain things to be done and done properly, to some, it may come across as though that opportunity is not there for them to make that decision. But the thing is, it's there. They've got opportunity to come forward for the elections, and we'll ask ourselves, how many people come forward to say, listen, I will register, I will participate in the process, I will wait on the queue no matter how long it takes, I'm willing to pay the price. Look at the local councils. Who are those who are allowed to head them? The chairmen, the council members, and it goes on and on. Are we doing enough all by ourselves other than just coming forward and speaking about it? What about the actions?
The rising consciousness that we're experiencing now must, at the end of the day, throw up new crop of leaders who are genuine, who are dedicated, who have the fear of God to move this nation forward. And I look at the present clamor for a national conference. But of course we have representatives, elected representatives, who are taking a look at our constitution as it is. We have a charter of demands. Some people are agitating for creation of new states, for whatever reasons. But our belief is that these agitations are genuine. They will lead to even more development in the areas where these new states are being requested.
That's your belief?
I think so.
You believe that?
I think so.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify that.
If the agitations are genuine, I believe that because, of course, there's imbalance already in the number of states that are...
No, because this is also bearing in mind that, in recent times, the CBN governor has always, has said that a lot of states are not viable. With the current structure that we have, he even believes the states should be merged, because what we have now is the states are going to the federal government, getting their monthly allocations and spending it. Nobody's actually looking inwards to see what they can bring up for themselves and do what they need to do in their own state. So in the light of that, would you still say that, more state creation is the way to go?
Part of the structural changes that we're canvassing is that even in the area of revenue allocation, states must get more now. That is part of the charter we are putting forward to the National Assembly.
Must get more?
Yes, must get
more money?
More money, because these are centers of development. Is that your
submission? Is that your submission at the conference, or that's the submission of your own group?
That's our submission. That states must. We're even saying that, look, remove local government creation from the purview of the National Assembly. Let local government creation be the exclusive purview of states.
Because this is also
okay. So you will not use local government as one of the bases for revenue allocation. So give more money to, give 70% of federally generated revenue to state governments. Federal government keep 30%.
That's your own. No,
yes.
I want you to clarify that. That is your own submission in the light of the fact that states in the Niger Delta are already beginning to clamor again for resource control. In other words, if they get this resource, if they control the resources from their states, produced in their states, what will most likely happen is that the revenue accruing to the federal government from that area, especially from oil, which is major 90% of our revenue, would be depleted.
Yeah,
right?
Before we get to that point.
So what money would they be given to the states, assuming everybody brings this demand?
But don't forget that Nigerians, not only Niger Deltans, Nigerians have to come together to agree for that kind of allocation formula you are talking about.
No, I'm
but before we get there, we need to give more money to the states that are centers of development closest to the people, so that we can have meaningful development.
This is about giving more money to the states. Doesn't it worry you that that's how it is? It's still about giving, not about states
No.
creating
in
and
addition
giving
to
something
the internally
to a pot?
generated revenue, which is clear that state governments have to enforce and embark upon.
Allow me to comment here, because I think you just added to this voice of state creation, which some people have always been asking or agitating for. Quite frankly, perhaps if we can really let the people know what those states that were created maybe in the 90s as well as late 90s have been able to achieve, perhaps we can actually situate your point and say, truly, this has aided development, as against when we had regional governments in the 60s.
That's right.
So what can we say we have seen in those states that were created that can warrant us going into creating more states for us as a nation?
Well, I think that development has been rapid in the states that have been created.
Can you give an example?
Okay, we know that there are problems of corruption, definitely, both at the federal and the state levels. And of course, part of the change we are canvassing for is that institutions of government that have been set up to tackle corruption must be empowered to carry out this task.
Apart from Lagos,
because you see, corruption is at the base.
Sorry, let me key this in. I'm sorry to butt in so that you can actually understand what we're saying. Apart from Lagos, and quite recently, we started hearing stories from Edo State as well as Rivers State. Which state can we, off the cuff, say has been able to generate its own revenue, as you rightly said, internally generated revenue, without looking towards the allocation they get from the government?
But you see, you can never get enough internally to be able to face the challenges of providing necessary infrastructure, healthcare delivery, shelter for your people, and all that.
Why
it's not possible.
Why is that impossible?
Because the revenue points available internally in every state in Nigeria, for instance, Lagos is a commercial nerve center. Lagos can go it alone, even without federal government allocation, and it's been demonstrated when the federal government seized the allocation of that were due to Lagos councils some years ago.
I would think
Lagos was able to carry on.
Some states would actually tell you that that's not true, in the sense that what they have been clamoring for is a change in the constitution so that they too can have power over the resources in their own state. A state like Ondo State now would tell you that they have one of the world's largest reserves of bauxite, of bitumen,
that's right,
and that they have not been able to exploit because that is the preserve of the federal government, and that they're looking for a change that would enable them explore those resources in their state so that they too can become self-sufficient. So how about us, say, twinkling with the constitution in such a way that it also empowers states to be able to do what they need to do in their own states?
As I said, that is the ultimate goal. But before we get there, we need to empower states through allocation of more funds. Because you see, it will also help those disadvantaged states which do not have this kind of resources we are talking about, to be able to use additional funds which they can get, to be able to develop those areas they need to develop before we get to the ultimate.
How do we ensure that if they get more funds, they'll channel it really and truly into development? Because I mean, you know what they can do by what they've done before.
That is left to the people of the states concerned. People are beginning to ask their leaders questions about how their affairs are being run. People are now emboldened to ask questions, and that is the way to go.
Yeah, but would it be fair for us to allocate or canvas for them having more money if we'll then leave it to the people to decide whether or not they ask, and even the question they ask, if they've not gotten answers? How does it sound?
Well, people need development. People need good roads. They need potable water. They need power. They need shelter.
Without creating more states, they really can't achieve all of that?
No, you see, there's always the fear of domination of the minorities in almost every region of Nigeria by the majority tribes, and that is why there is always agitation for. But we must get to the end of it, and I think that I think we're getting to the end of it. Once we redress the imbalance, the current imbalance, you have 19 states in the north and 17 in the south. So once we can balance it out, and then we can say we'll satisfy the yearnings of our people in this regard.
I was reading Professor Tam David West, and he tried to talk about the state of the nation, and that was way back in 2002, and he looked at the word amalgamation, and he said, well, they actually deliberately use that word because an amalgam, which we all know is an admixture of different constituents. So, in other words, when we are being brought together as one country, because some would say not a nation, everyone understood that we're quite different. And as the late Sardauna did say, he said, well, let's try to understand our differences. So if we bring that into this and we key it into all of these agitations, we try to understand our differences first as a people. Isn't that a step towards fixing everything, and even the call for state police, which we'll be talking pretty much later?
You know, the story of Nigeria is quite interesting. We have these diverse cultures, diverse peoples, but running through, we have also similarities, and those similarities bind us together. And so, in our diversity, there's strength. And it is that strength that we should leverage upon to ensure that we get the development that we want. And so, I do not quarrel with those who are calling for a national conference. Let us redefine the way we live together.
Were you impressed with what you saw with the National Summit?
Quite impressed. But you notice that
If you were given the chance to add your voice to it, what would you have said to at that summit, rather?
I would have said, please encourage the conservative elements from the north, because you notice that the conservative elements from the north were not part of that summit. It was only the activist Barado Musa that was there, and he's always been vocal about, developmental issues and all that. So when you have a situation where the conservative elements do not form part of your discussion, then you have a problem. But like I said, the National Assembly, with our representatives, are there. They are looking at the Constitution right now. And in fact, they should even start with their own structure.
How do you
because we are saying the presidential system as we are running it is rather too expensive. So we're saying, look, let's have maximum of a 200 member unicameral legislature.
But you know that will be some kind of that would also negate your call for creation of more states, because if we're talking about a reduction of members there, remember we have 3 senators from each state, that is 3 senatorial districts,
that's right,
as well as the loads of House of Representatives members. So by the time you try to prune all of that down, and we have more states, more local governments, people will cry foul
all that will change.
Yes,
it's a question of the Constitution. If the Constitution prescribes that you'll have just 5 members from each state. So we have 36 states now. I know that 10, as they are purported, we have 46 states. 5 members from each state. We have a little over 200. That is perhaps a manageable number. We'll have just 1 chamber, because we've seen that, look, the overhead costs of running almost a 500 member assembly is not tenable, and we don't need it. So these are some of the changes that we're canvassing.
You don't see a case whereby minority groups, which you already said sometimes are papered over by the majority. You don't see a case whereby they too will begin to clamor for their own representatives, because if we have a group that's just, say, a little over 250, someone will tell you that would not cover all the ethnic groups in this country.
If we're going to cover all ethnic groups, then we're looking at over 1,000 member legislature, but we don't want that. 5 members from each state. The way they get their representatives will be up to the states. Okay, but we do not need more than a 200-member legislature.
So you actually do believe that we should have at least 10 more states?
That is the agitation. That is not my own...
but you support it.
But I do not mind, as long as it addresses the concerns of those who believe that they are being marginalized in the scheme of things.
You do not also believe that there will always be those who will always say that they have been marginalized? Because if you look at it, if you have said that we're going to have 1,000 people in the House of, whatever we decide to call it, the unicameral legislature you're proposing, there will always be those group of people that will be marginalized, even in the arrangement of the new state creation, as it were.
Now then, the request can be endless, because every small locality will be asking. So there's a point where you say no more. Of course, don't forget that this agitation has been on since 1996, and we're only getting to it now because of the structural imbalances that continue to hinder development.
In that case, then, would we be talking about all of these challenges if we had good governance?
Oh, I believe that good governance, that is a hallmark of any society that is looking at development, is non-negotiable. That's hallmarked by transparency and accountability. And so that is our bane. We have material, human and natural resources, but our problem has been leadership, good governance, to harness all these resources that we have.
What is it you canvassing then? Professionals for change.
We're canvassing in Nigeria that is managed by God-fearing leaders who have the genuine interest of this country at heart.
Not by professionals.
Well, professionals in government are doing pretty good.
You think so?
Yeah.
How? Why do you say that?
Well, tested professionals. I can take the example of some of them in government right now. Okonjo Iweala, Lamido Sanusi. It goes off course sometimes. The new Minister of Agric. They are agents of change that President Jonathan has brought into his cabinet to help with the transformation agenda. Look at what is happening in the agri sector, for instance.
It's interesting, yet you believe that he's been hijacked. Because that was what you said
That's what I'm
at
saying.
the beginning.
He's been hijacked by elements, not necessarily within government. Not necessarily within government.
So
don't forget that there are forces. There are forces that, you know, leaders have to contend with, even outside the official circles.
What about education? Because I heard people say that if that sector was vibrant, if they were playing their role in the society, we wouldn't be where we are today. Be it security challenge, terrorism, governance, even this tested professionals you talked about. They would have been coming forward with blueprints of what the government should be doing in terms of the economic policies. Are we seeing that? That
is why, for instance, I quarrel with the unnecessarily large allocation in the proposed 2012 budget for security. That is twice the provision for, in fact, 3 or 4 times the provision for education.
You quarrel with it because, okay, they don't have so much for education. That much for education.
For education, yes. Because how can we be spending 3 billion a day for security? I believe that the problem of security in our country is intelligence gathering. It's community involvement. And I listened to your review of the newspapers this morning. Some armory was discovered somewhere in Kano. Some armory belonging to Boko Haram. People tipped off the government. So you need to engender the confidence of the public to make Nigerians give information to the government. So it's information gathering, intelligence gathering, rather than high sophisticated equipment.
All right. Well, what do you think about those who also say that professionals seem to have been caught up in this hustle and bustle, trying to make ends meet, as opposed to just getting back there, picking up the gauntlet, coming up with research proposals and research findings as to certain things going wrong in some sectors?
The skyline is changing now. Nigerian professionals are determined to be involved in the affairs of this nation.
What way?
For instance, they're not coming out to talk. They're not coming out to put up ideas on how Nigeria should be run. They're now going into politics.
And that's a plus.
It's a plus.
Are they going to talk about some of the professionals who were in certain government public positions, I should say, and they didn't do well, and why they didn't do well, and how they can improve upon it? Because people would expect that.
You know, we're all human beings, first and foremost, with our frailties, with our problems. And so, few professionals that have gone in there, that have messed themselves up, are human beings. Okay, so you cannot discount that. But generally speaking, professionals who have had good education, who have had good upbringing, who have had the right exposure, international exposure, are bound to do well in government, because the experiences that they have gathered over the years will be brought to bear in decision making. Look at Governor Fashola of Lagos, for instance. He's doing very well with the little resources he has. If he has more, he will do even better. So that is an example of a professional for you.